Welcome to episode 48 of the FoodGrads Podcast, the podcast where we explore careers in the food, beverage, and agricultural industries. I'm your host, Veronica Hislop, a PhD candidate in molecular science and career partner with FoodGrads. This week on the podcast, I interviewed Tanguy Etoga, CEO and founder at Normex Inc. Normex Inc. is a food safety software company that will make the expected bridge to overcome the problem of limited resources and help companies automate their quality, food safety, and health and safety tasks and operations. Today, several companies in North America have adopted Normex to maintain their food safety systems. On this week's podcast, Tanguy talked to me about Normex Inc. and how it came to be. Tanguy walked me through his career journey and shared a story of where his passion for operational efficiency, quality, and food safety comes from. We spent a lot of time talking about leadership and what it looks like in food safety, leading by example, building trust, actively listening, and figuring out how you can provide value. But that's just a bit of a teaser. Tanguy does a much better job at describing him than I just did. Tanguy is a great storyteller, giving firsthand insights of how he led working in his first quality role as a quality assurance manager and just how he learned through that experience. If you are interested in a career in quality assurance and are thinking about one day becoming a manager, then you need to listen to this episode. So enough with that introduction. Let's get on with the show. Thank you so much, Tanguy, for coming on the show. I am so interested to learn more about your company, what you do. I had a chance to go through your career journey, and it seems like you've done so many leadership things. You're now involved in the OFPA. And as someone who's personally worked in the food industry, dealing in food safety and paperwork, I know how annoying it can be. So it's really cool that you are out there with your company to try to tackle this. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me, Veronica.
So to get us started, because I have to know more about what Normex does as well as your role there, can you tell me a little bit more about your company and we'll take it from there?
Normex started in 2018 with an idea. The idea was, back in 2011, when we used to have, a company which still exists today. Back in 2011, called Safer Produce Consulting. And we do consulting in Canada and the US. The more we're doing food safety consulting with all the implementation of HACCP and GFSI programs, as well as FISMA and the Canadian regulation program. So, when you do an implementation, you have a lot of paperwork that's generated out of those implementations, because when an auditor comes in, he demands paperwork. So he wants to have your ratings. And all these companies start to ask the question, hey, is that something that exists? So we can limit the amount of paperwork that we produce, because after 6 months, you can fill out 2, 4, 5, 6 cabinets, depending on the size of the company. So that's how we came up with that idea in 2018 to create Normex.
So tell me a little bit more about how Normex actually organizes this documentation.
Normex is a technological company. We help all the food processors, not only food processors, but we go from farm to fork to automate the food safety tasks and operations. So everything that you do on paper will be transferred into computer means, electronic means, but we automate that. So you save time, which is very valuable, especially in this time of post-COVID, if you can call it that way. And there's also a labor shortage. So what we do is we save time, and then we automate the food safety tasks and operations. And we also have in Normex health and safety modules, because that's what the client wants to have as well. We have food safety modules, quality modules, and health and safety modules. So all that are automated. So you save time.
That's excellent. And so one of the key things that you had mentioned was automating. So I was just curious, let's just say a production staff is filling out this information. Are they still filling out the paperwork, or is it going directly like through maybe a tablet or such?
So the way it's done, there's no paperwork. So the role, the purpose, the end goal of Normex is to eliminate all the paperwork. So you don't have to copy, photocopy, printing, scanning, managing the version distribution. You don't have to do any of that. What Normex will do, all the food certification or all food safety requirement demands you to have a monitoring and a verification. And that's exactly how we build Normex. There's two profiles in Normex. There's one profile that we call supervisor, and that's the monitoring profile. And that's the one that the employee and the operator will use on the production floor when they do their production or when they do the sanitation checklist, pre-op checklist, temperature control checklist. And once they do that, they can use a tablet or they can use a cell phone or they can use a laptop as they want, even a computer. And once they fill the information, an alarm, a notification goes automatically on the manager's profile. And the manager is the one that has what we call the verification profile because he needs to approve. And once that alarm goes on his or her dashboard, he'll be able to see exactly who did what so he can start the approval process.
Wow. Because I know when I was working in QA, unfortunately, there was even a circumstance where, because we were dealing with the filing cabinet, if somebody puts that piece of paper in the wrong month just by accident, maybe a little tired that night, put it in the wrong thing, it can be a very tedious time to go try to sift through that paperwork. And especially when you need to know something like within minutes, sometimes if something's more serious, like I could see this really coming to the rescue.
Absolutely. And it happens almost any audit. Let's say, for example, you have a management review, you discuss with your manager or your director or even an auditor, and they ask you, hey, can you pull out the pre-op that was done on December the 15th? You're going to have to look through a lot of paperwork to find that information. By having this type of system, you just select the date and then the record will appear right away.
First of all, that is amazing because it is so stressful when audits are happening. And even regardless of an audit's happening, you should be able to find this documentation like stat, because that's what QAs are supposed to do. But I was curious because we haven't really mentioned, I know that you own the company, but I was curious more to understand what your role looks like owning Normex and what are the types of things that you're doing on the day-to-day.
I do a lot of software development with my development team because I'm a consultant and I know food safety, and we have Normex has a consultant team. And what we do on a daily basis, we ensure that everything in Normex is according to all the requirements, whether it's, again, FISMA or HACCP or CF5A, GFSI. So we ensure that they understand, our engineer understand all these requirements, and we translate that into technology. So that's one side of my day. The other side of the day is to ensure that the clients and even the prospect are educated. So we work with a representative to help those clients to understand what Normex is about, and also to understand, so they understand that there's a better way of managing food safety. Yes, they've been managing food safety very well, but that's not the point. The point is, how many resources did you take to manage the food safety? And this comes and says, you can be as efficient and as good or even better by using less resources. So that's how we approach that, and that's how I dedicate my days.
Oh, that is so cool. And I love to know that you're doing something like related to software, because one of the things that I think a lot of people can maybe get siphoned into thinking that they have to do one specific type of role in the sense, but I think that it is such a cool skill set to find a way to complement with the software design, because as someone like myself doing research, sometimes I wonder, oh, maybe it might be useful for me to know software design or something like that. So being able to combine that love of food safety and finding solutions that are like, that's really cool.
Thank you.
So with that being said, I'd actually love to know a little bit more about you and how you maybe got to having these types of schools. And I would love to know a little bit more about your career journey. Would you be able to walk me through that?
Yeah, absolutely. I arrived in Canada in 2000, no, in 1998. So I arrived in Canada in 1998, coming from Cameroon. Cameroon is a country in Africa, in Central Africa. And just a long story short, when I arrived here, I didn't know how cold it was. I was used to go to France, and in France it was about 15 degrees in winter, but when I arrived here, it was minus 30. So there was a big difference, about 60 degrees difference. I did my university in Quebec, a university called Université Laval, and that's where I did my food science and technology degree. That was back in 2002. And once I finished, I moved to Montreal and started working in the field. I had different positions in different industry. I worked as a lab technician at a refinery, so sugar company. And then I worked as a quality supervisor at the cake mix plant company still in Montreal. And the turning point was when I started working in another company, and that was an importer of fruits and vegetables. And I was working as a quality manager. And that's why I got really involved with quality management, food safety management, and also in production, sanitation, because that was a small company. And that's one of the biggest experience that I had. And that's where I decided exactly what I wanted to do, because I saw almost everything that a company can do in terms of the variety of the fields in the food industry. So I decided that I wanted to do quality assurance, and I decided it will be all the related function, and it will be with that corridor of quality assurance. Of course, the management side will have to be involved with that, because I like the management side of the side as well. And I went to get my business degree in McGill, and then I moved on to Alberta because I had an opportunity in Alberta at Calgary, as you saw on LinkedIn, and that was also a turning point at Calgary, because Calgary it's a very big company, and I didn't have that. I didn't have that exposure at a big company, and I wanted to have that, and I learned so much with so many great people over there. And that's when I decided, after working at Calgary, to start my business. And I came back, and we are located now in Gatineau. That's a small city close to Ottawa, and that's where we operate from, Normex.
That's so cool. It's nice to hear that you've had these experiences both in both small and large companies. And you did mention about Cargill being a larger facility, and that really got you inspired to continue on with this path. And one thing that had stood out to me when I was reading your very impressive LinkedIn profile was that you had some impressive results, like improving efficiency for one of the, I can't remember off by hand, but that,
like that.
yeah, thank you. So it made me, it stood out to me that it seems like leadership is very key role, being able to bring down to improve efficiency. And I wanted to know a little bit more about your philosophy of leadership. Was that something that you've actively tried to develop over the years, or like how have you gone about that?
Yes, because I was mentioning earlier that the fruits and vegetable importer role, the company when I worked for in Montreal, that was a turning point, because I learned so much working for SMEs, and especially for that company. And I had a lot of exposure, because the person and the leadership that was working with and for, they gave me that opportunity, because when you're in SME, you do a lot of things. There's not a lot of people working, so you are really short staffed. So you have to develop a lot of skills, and you don't need to manage people to have an impact on someone else's work, and that's leadership. And that's something that I wanted to develop as well, and that's why I went on to get a certification called Six Sigma. So that's black belt certification. And the reason why I have that is I want to have the tools to pinpoint some problems at the company and try to resolve those problems. And when we say problem is to eliminate the waste. And that's all type of waste. So it can be waste of time, waste of resources, waste of all type of waste that prevent the company to achieve its goal. And that's how I wanted to approach that. And I wanted to preserve myself as a value. And that's how I started to build my leadership skills. So the goal was to show I can help in different ways the organization. And that's what at Cargill, that's what I gave that project. And the project was to reduce production downtime. And one thing that I had to manage also is at that time, I wasn't working for production. I was working as quality assurance manager. They saw that I had that skill because I was always on the production floor working with production, even if I was quality. And they asked me if I want to be part of the team to reduce production downtime. Well, I said yes. And the more we advanced on the project, the more they realized that I had the skill to do that. And we start getting information, taking the data, all the equipment, and try to find the reason why we had so many downtime. And before I knew it, I was the leader of the project. And they were following my lead because I knew the process of system. And we were able to reduce the production downtime. I don't remember by heart, but I think that was maybe 20 or 30% in 6 months. We're talking about over $200,000 saving because
Wow.
we reduced that loss. So that's how I applied the leadership there.
I really like that. And one thing that you said that stood out to me was leadership isn't about managing people, if I remember correctly. And
Yes.
okay, that's a really good way of thinking about it. And I almost feel like in a way how do I want to put it? Like, I want to say the word that's coming up is it's less of an egotistical approach. Like it's really focusing on building those skills because you have the skills that people can follow, not because you are telling them do this or that, but because you have something to give. And it's more of that giving role because you have the skills because you want to help. But also, I love the fact that you were able to change an organization that at first that wasn't directly your role to do. Like you are able to make changes because you took observations and that's amazing.
Yeah, you know what? Let me tell you a story. When I came out of school, you have a bachelor degree and you think that the world owes you something because you have a diploma and you feel good about it. And I started to work on that techniques plan. And right away, I was supervising a technician. That was my first job, supervising a technician. But that technician had 35 years of experience. So I didn't know at the time that he knew way more than I did. So I thought my position, because I was the manager, not the manager, I was a supervisor at the time. I thought my position gave me the knowledge, but no. And I remember the first week that I started, they had a problem and he tested me and he came and sat down and said, "Hey, boss." He said boss on purpose. So he said, "Hey, boss, what do we have to do in this case?" So I looked at the problem and I looked left, right, up, down. I didn't have any idea what to do. Any idea, no idea. And I had a choice. One, I could have used my position and said, "Hey, this is what we're going to do," and then hit the wall. Or two, I can rely on his experience and then follow his lead. So I learned at the same time. And luckily, I chose the second option. And that's how I learned a lot from him. And that's what get me started in that part and say, position does not empower you on anything. Leadership does. And to acquire or to get that leadership, you have to learn the skill to develop some skills. And the first skill that you have to develop is to listen to everybody across the company, because everybody, they always have something to teach you. And that's how they trust you. Otherwise, it's going to be difficult for you to succeed if you don't have that type of listening.
I'd like to dive a little bit deeper on that because one of the things that I know, I was in no part a supervisor when I was doing my QA role. But one of the things that I did struggle with, which I did try listen, I didn't think I was always the right one, but how did you manage you're going about, you're listening, you're taking the input, but how were you able to make the sound judgments with and I'm trying to figure out how to word this question. How can you lead with a lack of experience, even though you are actively trying to listen?
You know what? That's the $1 million question.
Okay. Okay.
You don't have the experience.
Mhm.
You have a position and you have a work to do and you have to achieve some results. And that's why, again, that's why you have to decide, one, you do it your way, or two, you do it with the team's way. So you have to use a team's approach. And in your team, even if you manage one person, that one person have the experience. You have to rely on the people that have the experience, that have the skills, that have the knowledge. And at the end of the day, you're going to be the one responsible to make the decision. But the last thing that you want to do is you don't want to make a unilateral decision. You have to consider all the point of view, all the experience. And that's how you develop that leadership skill and the knowledge skill as well. Because when you hear different point of view and when you hear different experience, different exposure, it feeds you. It feeds your knowledge, it feeds your experience, and you even fast track that experience and knowledge. So that's something that my recommendation is to choose that food.
That is really good advice because it's hard when even if you are trying to be humble coming into a new role and you're a young person, coming out of school and you do have some knowledge. I mean, you did just finish a degree, but it's a difficult transition coming in just being in a new environment because being at school, you're told, here's the coursework, here's a quiz, write it down. But then when you go into the actual manufacturing field, it's totally different. You're interacting with other people, you're making decisions that actually affect other people. And it's a tough transition and you grow really fast, I find.
Yeah, it is. It is. And there's so many things that school will not teach you and life will. And you have to be humble and learn from life. For example, you won't get to know things that work until you start working. Things like, yes, you come with your technical knowledge that you learn at school, but once you get to the company, well, the company has a culture and you cannot learn that from school. So you have to know what's the culture at that company. When I say culture, for example, at the company, do people act without discussing first? Because you have some company when an incident happens, they have the liberty to fix the problem right away because that's the company's culture. But at other company, they have to meet first. There's a chain of command before you make a decision. So that's one example. So if you come out of school, you don't know what is what. So you want to make sure that you learn that. And that's the knowledge. That's one side. Another side can be political matters. Well, that's how we call that. Who has the power of the company? That's something that's important because you can have all the right answers if you don't run that for the person has the power to decide. You won't change anything. And those things that you learn that when you start working, it is just that it happens. Even if it's not really visible at the company, there's always those lenses that you have to consider. And you learn that when you start working.
That is so true. And company culture is so important that it's something that you do not see on paper when you're applying for the job. And sometimes it's hard to tell until you're in that role. And When it comes to, though, having outside support, maybe not necessarily in the company, when it comes to food safety, though, is there a lot of support in terms of a sense of community? Because I was recently speaking with Aaron Aboud, who
Yes.
you should already be familiar with from the Ontario Food Protection Agency. So maybe I'm segueing to talking more about that. But I wanted to know from you personally, do you think that there is a sense of community in food safety that you can help depend on, or young people can, for their careers?
Yeah, the community is growing. I remember when I was at school, I was looking for the same information, and that was a little bit harder. And right now, you have LinkedIn, you have Facebook. I know, Aaron, we are on the same board of director at the OFPA, and you have the OFPA, and OFPA is really good organization in terms of membership. Welcomes the student members, so you have a lot of student members of OFPA, and that organization will reunite or unite all the food safety experts, which is a really good result for students. Also, and it's in the GTA area. That's actually amazing for any student that want to be part of a community, a food safety community.
When I also refer to like community, maybe we can talk a little bit more about what that is. So what do you think is important for having a good culture of food safety?
What I think is important, I always like to start with listening before talking. To me, that's very important because everybody has something to share and everybody has something to say. But when you start working at a food company, for example, it's important to listen what's going on. And something for you to understand exactly what I'm talking about is just a long story short. When I started at Cargill, that's something that happened. And you probably know that, when you work as a quality, or either as a food safety expert, quality control, quality assurance, they are not viewed, or just a few companies view them as a value to the company. But a lot of companies do not view them as value. They view them as a necessary evil, because you are necessary to get my product out. That's why I had you. So you have to show your value. And to show your value, you have to listen, right? The reason why I'm saying that is the production wants to produce and then kick the product out. But the quality wants to slow down, come and say, hey, slow down, because you can have food safety issue, you can have this type of problem, quality problem. So what has to be done here on the quality side is you have to listen to understand what are their struggle, and to get them trust you because you understand what their role and what their work is about. Don't stay in your office, because when you stay in your office, they view you as a threat, because you're going to come and say, hey, I'm just going to put your line on the wall because you find this and this in the product. So when you're on the floor and you discuss with them, you help them solving their problem, that's when they start listening to you. And I think that's how you build a value and you build a sense of community, not only at the facility, but also outside.
Trust, that was a word that stood out to me when you said that, because it really sorry, my head's also jumping. I know that you were saying that you would go out on the production floor, but I don't mean to say it this way, but did that also involve things like small talk, or was it strictly just, would you say, talking about the job?
Everything.
Okay. Okay. I just asked that because to me it is, in a weird way, that was something that I was thinking about when I was on the floor, because I felt it was important to at least have a little bit of a, hey, good morning, how are you? Like that type of stuff, because I felt that it was important for them. And this is just of my personal experience, that I felt like it was a better workplace, but there was also that building of trust. And I found it was also a hard line to walk, because I wanted to be, again, I was only in the role for a year. So I was definitely still learning, and I still am, but that line of being friendly, but There's work to do. And it was something that it was hard for me to navigate when I was first in my role.
Exactly, absolutely. And then at any organization, at any group that you participate, as soon as you're not alone, each or at least two, you always have to fall in. You always will follow the 4 phases. We call that the 4 phases of a group. That also, you leave that also with the production employees. You have, we call that forming. That's the first step. Forming, storming, norming, and conforming. So just not to be technical, when I say forming is you are hired at a company, so you form a team, right? Whether it's a quality team or an employees team along with the production flow. Now, the second stage is a storming. That means they don't know you, you don't know them, but you found them there. So they will test you. And that's the storming side. They will see if you know the first issue or the first problem you will shy away, or you will stand your ground and you will discuss it. They're going to want to test you. And that's the storming side. And that's very important phase, because at that stage, they'll know exactly what you made of, right? And that's where you have to demonstrate that you, not only you are persistent, you want to find a solution, and you know what you're talking about, but at the same time, you're willing to listen. And then this is the phase that you have to inspire respect. Even if you don't have the same knowledge that they do, they have to know that, hey, you know what? I have to respect Veronica because of her skills, because I see that she can help us, because I see that she'll listen, etc., etc. Now, once you pass that phase, then it's easier. We call that known. So that means they know at that stage that if this happens, I'm going to call Veronica, and we're going to do this, because they know that you went through that already. And then the last stage is conforming. So we just start all over again. And that's very important when you start at a company or when you start in any group, you have to go with all those phases.
I'm just thinking, I'm like, okay, good thing this is getting recorded, because this is the type of information that I would want to be knowing, like coming into a role, because I've experienced what you're talking about. I would have never thought about it this far, about how it makes sense what you're saying. And I know as school doesn't prepare you for this type of stuff. And I can tell that you have experienced this and you've identified this type of experience stepwise.
Yeah, at some point, it may happen that you work with some employee that cross the lines, and because they want to see how you react. And depending on the way you react, they will either respect you, and that's also in the storming stage. They will either respect you or they'll know that they can do that again. So it's really going to be up to you. And you have to deal with the situation in a good way, a respectful way, so they know that they have someone in place that stands his ground or right ground, that it's respectful and that has to be respected. Mm-hmm. And after that, everything will run really smoothly. But the biggest thing here is you have to always show that you are there to provide value for them. Quality is a supporting role. Quality is support. The role of quality is to ensure that the product that goes out, meaning production, right? Because production is the primary role of a company. And you have to, the production employee have to see quality as a supporting role. They're supporting us. So they are on our side. They're not against us. And that's how to, it's a fine line, but depending on the company and depending on the type of personality, you have to navigate and find a way to present yourself as a value.
It's really difficult, especially when you're young, because you're growing up in general, you're trying to navigate coming out of school, working the workforce, but then with the added layer of being in food safety, it's a difficult task, but it's really rewarding as you go through it. I'll say that.
Definitely. It's really difficult. I admit it's just trial and error, right? So you're going to try, you're going to fail, you're going to try, you're going to fail. And then, hey, guess what? You're going to try again, then you're going to pass. That's what's beautiful about it.
Wow.
You have to keep trying.
Yes. And hearing you talk about this as well, I can tell that you have a passion or like a love for food safety and such. And I'm just curious, like, where has that come from? What keeps you going that you want to stay involved in food safety, create Normex, keep improving? Like, where does that come from?
That's way back when I was a child. And that energy. I remember we were having dinner with my family, and we were eating mangoes back in Cameroon. And my dad, he just asked a question. He said, "Hey, Tanguy, when it's mango, that means it's the mango season, right? And the mango season, stays, a certain amount of week. Then I think a couple of weeks, then that's it. There's no mangoes. You cannot find mangoes anymore." And then asked me the question, "Hey, maybe you're going to be the one to find a solution so we can eat mango all year." Then I said, "Hey, that's not bad. If I can do that, my goodness, that would be amazing because we love mango so much." And the next time, the more I was growing up, the more I was looking for information about how to study something about food to present mangoes all the years. And I found this university degree called Bachelor in Food Science and Technology that I said, "Hey, maybe that's what I'm going to learn now." And yes, we are far from mangoes today, but I kept that energy with me, just help me to improve everything that I do with quality and food safety. In Normex, it's actually complementary to consulting because yes, we are consulting. We do a lot of mandates to implement, HACCP and GFSI. But the Normex came on the technology side to do exactly the same thing. So to say, once you have implemented, instead of doing paperwork, you can improve what you do and then use technology rather than paperwork. That fire just stays with me, and that's why I just keep going because I like it.
I love that. And I guess things are working out if we can get some mangoes in -30 weather in Canada. So I guess that's a good sign. But no, that's a lovely story. And, I think I'm going to leave it there on such a positive note. But before I do go, there's two more things I just wanted to ask you was you talked about it throughout the show, but I really wanted to take it the essence of what you've been saying. So what advice would you give students looking to go into a career of food safety?
I'll say three things. The first one is to find your interest. You have to start with that because you don't want to start something and then say, "Hey, I don't like it," and then just realize that after 5, 6 years. You have to find what interests you in food safety. When I say food safety, is it quality assurance? Is it R&D? Is it production? Is it sanitation? All these have an impact on food safety. Is it pest control? You have to find your interest, what you would like as a new employee or as a new person that's searching what you want to do. Once you have an idea, you can never be 100% until yourself, but you can have an idea when you look at what's the date of an R&D, what's the day of quality assurance person, etc. Then the second advice that I can give is go your first jobs at the beginning, look for SMEs. Don't go to the big company. Even if you have 200,000 at a bigger company, I will say no if it's my first job, because you lose an opportunity to learn a lot. At SMEs, you will do a lot of things. You'll do, even if you are hired to be a HACCP supervisor or HACCP coordinator, I can guarantee you do sanitation, you do production, you will help out in many areas, and that will develop a lot of skills. So you'll have a lot of skills that develop, which will prepare you if you want to go for a big company. You have all the tools, and that's the second advice. The last advice that I can give you is to make sure that you find a good boss at the SMEs, because you have a good boss, but you have bad bosses. So, and I'm pretty sure you're going to tell the difference between both. A good boss will help you, will be a mentor to you, and the bad one will not. The bad one will, you'll feel guilt all the time. That's not a good sign that you're the right place. The three advice in a nutshell.
Those are really good pieces of advice. Yeah, having a small company will definitely help you grow a lot faster because you get to be in the know of everything that's going on. You see it on the front hand, and it's really overwhelming at first, but it will help you grow like super fast. And I say challenging, but it's a fun challenge though too, because you feel like you're on like learning super speed compared to learning back in school, because you get to be in the thick of the problem. So that's really great. And thank you. The last thing I wanted to ask before I let you go, just in case people wanted to find you, where can people find you?
They can find me on LinkedIn, available on LinkedIn. So they can message me on LinkedIn and I'll reply.
Excellent. Thank you so much for coming on the show. You have given so much great advice, and I'm so excited to share this because I can just tell it's coming from a place of learning. And again, going back and emphasizing that point, I love the idea of growing through your own skills and growing through leadership there. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you, Veronica, and have a great day.
That was episode 48 of the FoodGrads Podcast. All the notes to this podcast can be found on the FoodGrads blog or by clicking on the Student and Grads tab on the homepage. There you can find any notes to past or future episodes. Do you know anyone you would like me to interview on the show? Perhaps yourself, or maybe there's a specific career path you would like me to explore. Then reach out to me and let me know. You can email me at veronica@foodgrads.com or any of the FoodGrads social media channels. Hope to hear from you. Going into a new role is never easy, especially when you are new to the food industry. I know it's a cliche that when you go into the workforce, you're going to learn way more on the job than you ever did at school, but there is a reason why there is a cliche, and that definitely goes for this type of field. Unless you're working in a lab by yourself as a QA or a QC, then you have to interact with those on the production floor. And it can be a little bit of a challenging task talking to all these new different types of people. Food safety and quality means supporting other departments, talking to them, understanding what they do. And it's just something that you don't get taught in school. I mean, they try to, but it's just, you'll never know that true feeling until you're on the production floor, talking with those in the role, and just trying to figure out what your place is in the company and just that overall culture. It's different in different places that you work for. And I think that it was really insightful to hear Tanguy's experiences with that. And I really think that he has grown throughout it and just give some really solid advice that I think is really helpful. And I really hope that if you're listening to this and you have heard what he talked about and you apply it to what you're currently doing, that you get better at your job and enjoy it more. And hopefully, if you're not quite at that part right now, maybe you should re-listen to this episode in the future, because I really think that it's really sound advice, and I really hope that it helps those that are listening. Anyways, that's it for this week's episode. Thank you everyone so much for listening, and I will see you next time.